Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for coming to my talk. It's called the $1 Million CEO Fraud Anatomy of a Business Email Compromise. We're just gonna have to get right into it, starting with a little bit of self-promo. So, as it said on the talk, my name is Damien, but you can find me online generally under some form of the username Sign. I work at a local, so Edmonton and Calgary-based managed service provider called Accurate Network Services. I put my water bottle down, but that's fine. We have my nice logo water bottle. I need this. That's okay. I'm a two-time NAET grad with a diploma in IT systems administration, as well as a post-diploma certificate in cybersecurity. Very impressive. That was the next line. I'm a member of ISC with my certified in cybersecurity, which is definitely the most impressive ISC certification. I have like my SC 300, and I just got my Security Plus, so I have the fundamentals down at least. Within cybersecurity specifically, my areas of interest are incident response, forensics, cloud security, OSINT. Basically anything that would make me a good my best skill is just based on that is investigating business email compromise. That's just what you need, I think. I have a blog. It's very professional and serious, cybercorner.tech. I publish articles about random things like finding malware via Shodan and malicious Azure app. So there's also the article version of this talk on my blog. And then other random social media. I don't have time for the demo today, but the demo, if it's not on my YouTube, it will be on my YouTube. I have 3 YouTube subscribers. It would be really cool to get to 5. Can we get me guys to 5 YouTube subscribers? That would make this whole thing worth it, I think. Oh, can we do 10? I think 10 is reason. Actually, I think everybody here, if we smash that like button and press subscribe, ring that bell for notifications, I believe they all say. All right, thing again. So, table of contents, because I do PowerPoints the way I was taught in school. First, I'll go over the incident that this talk got its name from. Then I'll cover the MITRE attack a little bit. I'll cover indicators of compromise and malicious activity that generally happens during a business email compromise. I'll go over some controls for managing the risk around business email compromise. I have a little preachy section where I shout out the Privacy Commissioner's office and try to scare all of the executives in the room. And then we have time for questions. Keep that in mind, questions at the end, please. I'm already so off topic naturally. On my own, I don't need your guys' help with that. And finally, I should preface this by saying that this is not a hypothetical incident that I made up for this talk. This was a real incident that I discovered completely by accident, as I do, and handled it on my own. And I should also mention that when you actually look up what CEO fraud is, this is not CEO fraud, but it sounded really cool, and sounding cool is more important in cybersecurity than actually being correct, I think. We're unhinged right now. That's what we get for putting me at the end of the conference. So first, I will cover discovery. The guy who did the first keynote was at Michael Spalding. He talked about PowerPoint writer's block. This slide killed me. I could not think of what to put here. And then I put this like noir graphic, and it's actually very lightly playing sound even, because sometimes when I talk about this incident, I kind of imagine myself almost, in my head, you think you're cooler than you are. I'm like a cool detective. I'm in my chair talking about this incident, but the incident was basically, how do I start this? It was January 10th, 2023. It was a day like any other. I was doing an audit. Specifically, I was doing a security audit for a customer, which we have anonymized as Company X. Part of my job at Accurate is to do security audits for our customers, generally based roughly on the CIS baselines. It's in an Excel spreadsheet, and I honestly find it, just because it could be automated, but it's low on the I think automation priority. One for pretty much the entire week at this point. I believe it was a Wednesday. And with that in mind, and knowing that I maybe like to go looking for trouble, could you really blame me? I mean, an audit is a really good time to do a threat hunt, and checking for a couple indicators of compromise wouldn't actually take me that long, right? So I check the most common indicator of compromise, spoiler alert, in Microsoft 365 for business email compromise, which is suspicious sign-ins. I just do this by exporting the all user sign-in log in Azure, open it in Excel, and filter out the known good IP addresses and locations. It's really accurate. MSP for SMB. So if you're like, oh, this sounds like really, really rudimentary. Yes. Trust me, I know. Excel, I know, trust me. But I do that, I clean it up in Excel, and I'm left with one specific account that had some sign-in irregularities, I would say. 1 minute, it's signing in from Edmonton. The next, it's signing in from Los Angeles. I resolve the IPs and I look them up in its sketchy proxy servers and VPNs. Generally, my email compromise senses are tingling at this point. But Company X does have an internal IT type person, and it's always best in this situation to get them involved as soon as possible. So I send the internal IT person the sign-in logs for this specific user, and I ask him, hey, is this expected behavior? He gets back to me, considering this internal IT person really surprisingly quickly, and tells me that this is not expected behavior and asks that I provide a record of file and email access. I say, oh, absolutely. And then because I think he didn't quite understand maybe what was going on, I was like, we should also secure this account, right? And so we obviously reset password, revoke sessions, all the normal account securing steps. So great. Now I am no longer bored. I have an email compromise to investigate, and I've got exactly what I've wished for. You know, nothing's going wrong at this point, right? So all that's left for me now is basically to investigate, complete my RCA, put it together in a document, root cause analysis, put it together in a document, send it to the client, sell them improvements, essentially is my process. So what actually happened during this incident, and then how did I reach my conclusion? So it wasn't until I had actually began my investigation that I realized that the affected user was the CEO of Company X. I had been reviewing the file access records from the audit of SharePoint access, and I saw a lot of access to what was the executive SharePoint site. So this, I was no longer really at this point glad to be dealing with an email compromise. I think you can imagine the slow sense of dread I had sinking in over the next 2 days, and I suppose probably the next week, actually. So how did I actually do my investigation? Well, first, I requested 90 days of the inbound and outbound message trace. This gave me just over 3,000 records. I then exported 90 days of user activity from the UAL, giving me 17,500 records. Now, to me, this is basically nothing. I regularly see 50 or 100,000 records, but important thing to mention, at the time I was investigating this, I barely investigated a dozen email compromises. So this was a lot of records, and I was a little overwhelmed, to say the least. I knew I needed something to make that investigation a little easier, so I did some research, and I started using a tool called the Hawk Forensic Tool for investigating a Microsoft 365 business email compromise. Basically just a PowerShell module, free and open source, and the guide doesn't update it enough, and everything constantly breaks. MS Online deprecation didn't update it, everything broke. But rather than complain, I should learn how to write PowerShell modules, but I don't want to do that. So Hawk is actually still, even though I complain about it a lot, it provides me with some really great things, such as a fully cleaned up, without having to do it, record of Exchange audit. So that's like email and like specific email access, which was about 11,500. It also gave me what I think the best feature of Hawk, which is the converted authentication log. It uses an IP address lookup API to match IP addresses from various logs to cities and countries. Before I had Hawk doing it, I would take an IP address from any of the logs, I would paste it into whatismyipaddress.com, and I would transfer that to a spreadsheet. 875. I don't want to do that 875 times. So thank you, Hog, for making it so I don't have to do that. Oh, it also tells me if it's Microsoft or not, which is nice. So I also just grabbed some other random logs, user audit in Azure. Eventually, he discovered some emails, just basically any sort of information that I could grab. The user at the time did not have E5. They had Azure AD P1, not even P2. So I was really limited with my tools within Microsoft that I could use to investigate, unfortunately. So if you've ever investigated an email compromise, you know that pretty much the next step is to just, I just squish everything together in multiple Excel spreadsheets. I have 3 monitors, 3 Excel spreadsheets. I'm just transferring things between them, trying to build out a bit of a timeline. I consider it something like just putting together a puzzle. So let's build that puzzle and look at it in a timeline. So after some investigation, I was able to determine that November 7th, 2022 was the date of initial access. I was able to determine this because, well, I had sign-in records back to, I believe, about October 12th, but this was the first suspicious sign-in. Generally, a month of unsuspicious sign-ins means there was no unauthorized access during that month. I also found a Defender alert, which is kind of Microsoft cloud security protection, email filtering, endpoint protection garbage. It does everything, saying that the CEO's email or CEO's account had clicked on a malicious link that was not known by Microsoft to be malicious at this time, but later Microsoft was like, oh, that was a bad link, sent an alert was missed. I know, trust me, I know. So Defender alert triggered missed alert fatigue. About that day, about 40 other alerts in the global admin mailbox. Configure your alerting rules correctly, please, internal IT. Then if you remember, January 10th, 2023 was the start, or was when I discovered the compromise and started my investigation. That's about 2 months. And trust me, a lot can happen in 2 months. So the next account access was actually November 11th, and this was when a lot of emails and files specifically pertaining to Company X's dealings with a specific kind of financial or investment firm were accessed. It was, there was very obviously a plan developed pretty soon after this, because an inbox rule was created to redirect email from the financial company's domain to the RSS subscriptions folder. Absolute classic. RSS subscriptions, archive, conversation history. 3 classic folders. So after this inbox rule was created, there was actually a period of several weeks when there wasn't any specific noteworthy actions on the account. It was mostly just email and file access. A lot of stuff about, again, Company X's dealings with this financial company, but also just internal documents, contracts, templates, just information about how Company X actually runs. Keep in mind, access to the executive SharePoint. He had access to everything. So November 30th, actually, is when things start to pick up. The threat actor emails the financial company with a request to add a new authorized signer to their financial account, asking what information is required. The financial company responds, providing some documents that need to be filled out and signed, as well as some personal information about the new signer that is needed. On December 2nd, the threat actor responds with the signed documents and the personal information. And the financial company, or actually they at the time, CC this supposed new treasurer, which is what they were claiming the new signer was. They were using a custom domain name that was the type of domain that a independent CPA would use, which is what they were claiming this treasurer's background was. Fun fact, this was a stolen identity of a retired CPA from Quebec. Spoiler, later the RCMP did find the gentleman, and he had no idea about any of this. So I'm sure that was a surprise to him. But again, identity theft, cybercrime ecosystem, love it. So what was it? Okay, after that, can you please, there we go. December 5th, the financial company responds and they provide some more documents that need to be signed. December 7th, the threat actor provides signed copies of more documents. Trust me, there was like at least 10 documents. but the financial company sees a problem with one of the documents and it needs to be re-signed. December 12th, the threat actor provides the proper signed copies of the documents. They also, at this time, register kind of a copycat or typo squat of Company X's main domain. They also similarly create inbox rules to redirect email from the copycat domain, and actually at this time, surprisingly, the custom CPA domain for some reason, to the RSS subscriptions. And it's from then on that they use the kind of typo squat domain for communication between the treasurer and the financial company. After this, there's another period of several weeks where there's nothing really specific that happens. It's mainly a lot of back and forth between Company X and the financial company. Financial company asks a bunch of clarifying questions. Oh, is so-and-so still a signer on the account? It actually says that you already have a treasurer. Are they no longer the treasurer? And also every couple days, the threat actor is emailing the financial company asking when the new signer is going to be added. They were very pushy and impatient. So, December 21st, the threat actor once again emails asking when the new signer is going to be added. It's at this point that the financial company advises that the NBIN, or the National Banking Independent Network, has gotten involved. To my understanding, they're like a overseer for small portfolio and investment management firms. Their compliance department requests some more information, which is provided. This actually made its way through both companies, both the NBIN and financial company's compliance department. That's what took so long. So this is all still generally the CEO's account CCing the typo squat domain. But when the typo squat domain does email the financial CEO, thankfully, or else I'd be missing a lot of information. But yeah, nobody noticed the typo squat domain or anything like that. And then finally, December 23rd, this new treasurer was added as a signer on the financial accounts. So if you've noticed, I haven't said something, which is I haven't said that anybody has called anybody on the phone, which nobody has. Nobody at the financial company has even emailed any other signer on the account. There was about 4 other signers on the account, or CC'd them, or anything like that. So make that what you will. But now, unfortunately, it gets serious. So the threat actor took a break for Christmas and New Year's, it seems, because the next activity was actually on January 4th. The threat actor initiated a wire transfer with the CEO's account, advising to coordinate with the fake treasurer. And they also asked what information was required. After a little bit of back and forth, the threat actor sent a wire transfer request from Company X's bank account to a bank account in Hong Kong for, what do I have here, $710,000 USD, which at the time with the exchange rate was $950,000 Canadian. So not quite $1 million, but $1 million CEO fraud sounded better than $950,000 CEO fraud, I think, so I can be forgiven for that. On January 6th, the wire transfer was finalized. On January 9th, the threat actor emails to say, hey, we didn't actually receive the wire transfer. They then resend the transfer, and this time the transfer does actually go through. So, if you remember, January 10th was the date of discovery and the start of my investigation, but I wasn't actually able to complete my investigation on this day. I was in class at NATE that day. Actually, I had to leave work and go do class. So you can imagine I didn't pay attention very well in class that day. And also told all my coworkers what was going on. But I didn't say the name of the company, I promise. I continued my investigation the next day on January 11th. I'm literally getting so I literally, it says scam. They really are. I get the Chinese one where it tells me I'm going to prison. I think it's the rough translation. I get those all the time. Tiananmen Square, it hasn't made them go away. That's kind of mean, actually, I've heard. You're not supposed to do that. So I continued my investigation, like I was saying, before I was interrupted by a Chinese scammer. I looked on my timesheet. I found the ticket. 11:50 a.m. On January 11th, also on January 11th at 10:36 a.m., the threat actor sent another wire transfer request to a different bank account in Hong Kong. They sent this one from the type of what domain CC'd the CEO. And this second transfer request was for $1.3 million Canadian. So I had actually discovered the January 4th wire transfer first, and I knew at this point it had already gone through. Wasn't worth calling the CEO, having a 20-minute conversation, continuing my investigation. So I said, all right, the money's gone. I'm going to finish my investigations. I am so close to the current date. About 20 minutes later, when I discovered that the second wire transfer had been sent, at this point about 2 hours before I discovered it, I really hoped that there was still time to stop this. So I called the CEO and asked him if he was aware that a wire transfer, actually that 2 wire transfers had been made from Company X's bank account to a bank in Hong Kong. One of those transfers roughly 2 hours ago for $1.3 million, and that a new authorized signer by the name had been added to the account as a new signer. He obviously was not, and he also didn't seem to believe me at first. He asked me a lot of questions that how do you know about this? And I was like, oh my God. So with as much, literally, I call this professional urgency in my voice as I could muster, because I'm not used to being commanding, I told him, I said, I strongly advise you to call the financial company and ask them if I am correct. And he did. I'd actually called internal IT, who was in the CEO's office, put me on speakerphone. The CEO called the financial company, confirmed that what I was saying was true, and canceled the second transfer. So after this, I just kind of had to continue on. I completed my investigation and put together my incident RCA document. I sent that incident RCA document and all of the logs and exported records to Company X, and eventually, at their request, law enforcement, like I believe it was the RCMP and EPS as well. A couple weeks after the incident, I got more information from Company X's account manager at Accurate, who told me that the financial company did not follow their internal process for adding new signers to the accounts nor making large fund transfers. Because of this, the financial company refunded Company X for the money that was stolen. Let's be honest, it was refund or lawsuit, and I think they realized one would be a lot less damaging to their publicity than the other. I think they made the right choice. So, who hacked Company X? I currently don't have an idea. The RCMP has actually not began their investigation. Fun fact, it's in queue. So make of that what you will. Yeah. EPS I've heard nothing from. But that's okay. I don't think we'll really ever know who did it. I'm not certain if it was an advanced persistent threat, but this was not a simple heist like changing an employee's direct deposit details. This was, admittedly, like I said, there was like at least 10 documents back and forth. This was definitely multiple people. You needed to be probably a little smarter than I am, because I could not figure out a lot of that financial lingo that they were doing. This was not somebody working alone, like I mentioned. But we'll never know. But all we can really do is learn from this incident and improve our own security posture and that of our customers and clients, so that we and them don't become this threat actor's next victim. So now from that, we're going to pivot 180 and talk about MITRE. So if you're not aware, MITRE is a framework for classifying malicious activity around an incident. It was originally developed for use in APT-caused incidents, but I mean, you can use it for you can use it for a child, attacking your Wi-Fi network with Wi-Fi pineapple, I suppose. That is something you can probably use MITRE for. Using the matrix, we can view specific techniques and tactics within categories, as well as, this is very helpful, suggested mitigations. We can also use the MITRE Navigator the MITRE Attack Navigator to visualize an incident. So MITRE has actually a couple of matrices, and there's specifically a cloud matrix, which contains techniques from general SaaS and IaaS incidents, as well as Office 365, Google Workspace, and Azure AD. I found that the cloud matrix is a little lacking, but I still appreciate what it tries to do, and I I hope maybe that MITRE will add more stuff to it, because it is, you'll see it's doesn't catch everything, unfortunately. So we will begin with initial access. This was via a phishing link because, as I mentioned, I did find that Defender alert in the global administrator mailbox. Initial access can also be categorized as specifically what account was used. So because the account used for initial access was an account that existed and was legitimate, it's a valid account, subtechnique cloud account. So next we have persistence. This is a common question. I get MFA was enabled on the account, unfortunately, fortunately, but it was bypassed, unfortunately. Incident was too historical. I couldn't tell how it was bypassed. Once they were in the account, they added an additional MFA method for persistence. So next we have defense evasion. So we have the technique of hiding artifacts and the sub-technique email hiding rules, also known as filters. Those were those inbox rules I mentioned that redirect email. So for defense evasion, we also have indicator removal and clear mailbox data. Emails were frequently deleted, but surprisingly, I didn't do this. I have no idea who did this. The CEO's account was on a legal hold, but it saved me from having to find the emails in our email fast backup, which can be a pain to go through. But I don't actually think I ever removed the CEO's account from a legal hold, actually. So very helpful for the incident. I should probably look at that again. And then finally, we have collection. It's the technique of collecting data from information repositories, specifically SharePoint. As I mentioned, a lot of sensitive company data was accessed from SharePoint used during the fraud. Fraud's a legal term, but I'm going to call it fraud. I actually call it wire fraud generally, because it was over wires. That's definitely the definition of wire fraud. We also have the technique of email collection, specifically remote email collection. My record showed email access over various protocols, and based on my now probably semi-extensive, they steal as many emails as they can, if not the entire inbox. So MITRE isn't perfect. I think that this matrix is still missing a lot, but I just have fun with it sometimes because I have very little life outside of what I do. What was that other, the keynote? I think it was Michael Spalding who was like, have a life outside of cyber. I was trying really hard to think of what my interest outside of cybersecurity was, and I could maybe a half interest. So last section, we went over some of the activity that a threat actor will do on a compromised account, but I want to discuss indicators of compromise, IOC, and activity further. To assist with this, I have a bunch of graphs that I made via pivot tables from just under 70 incidents that I threw into the table. And that I love graphs. I love graphs and I love looking at graphs. I think it's neat, and we're going to look at the graphs. So overwhelmingly, the most common indicator of compromise for business email compromise is suspicious authentication when looking at logins, or I suppose other activity. So when a user who only accesses the system from Edmonton suddenly starts using a sketchy proxy server from China, or a user who only accesses from a specific Windows device suddenly starts using Kali Linux, you know that something strange is probably going on. So once they're actually in the account, what do threat actors do? Well, according to my experience and my pivot tables and charts, email rules and filters are one of the most common forms of malicious activity on an account. It generally will say, hey, if an email is received from this domain or sender or contains these keywords, mark it as read and redirect it. Or it'll say, hey, mark all incoming email as read and delete it. And that second one is used exclusively in the case where an email is sending out spam. Emails unexpectedly being read or moved around or deleted is another common indicator of compromise. Another one is specifically sensitive access. During an email compromise, you will find records of sensitive access. Generally, the tools used by threat actors during an email compromise have the ability to automatically search email and cloud file storage for specific file types and keywords, invoice, contract, credit, debit, Visa, password. Sometimes this is to find invoices so they can make their own copies and send them out in a phishing email. Other times they find lists of every single company password in SharePoint, and you say, I talked to you about the SharePoint password list a week ago. Now we're going to have to change all these passwords, and we're going to have another discussion about this. That's happened about 5 times now, by the way. Yeah, it's 2023 and people keep passwords in SharePoint and Excel. But I have access to it, so it's really secure. Yeah, is it? And then finally, this is one I've seen an increasing frequency, at least its second usage. I've never seen the first, which is OAuth application usage in a malicious context. This is either OAuth phishing by the user themselves unknowingly consenting to a malicious OAuth application that allows for malicious activity or account takeover, or this is the one I see most often, the threat actor themselves consenting to the application, which is used for something like auto sending or persistence or exfiltration purposes. I hate this one.
Watching older folks in my family get it. At that point, I probably shouldn't be in control of my identity. It's an unfortunate fact. So we're assuming that everyone's a rational actor. And I'm going to argue that there are many actors. If you've got a mental condition, if you're ill, if you're in a coma,
Everybody's data gone. So how common are some of these activities? I'll show you really quick. I'm sorry this coloring is really bad. This is just the theme I wanted to go with for some reason. But blue, sorry, purple shows incidents where I classified it as high severity spam because my incident classification doesn't follow any known standard. I made it up completely on my own. Which if things don't make sense, then that's why. It makes sense to me. So you can see at first, the spam mass mailing was the most common incident type. The last time I saw it for a long time was in March. I got it again in October when the compromised account sent several of Accurate's employees a phishing email, which is always the funniest way to learn about an incident, in my opinion. Starting from January onward, I saw a large increase not only in incidents, but incidents where specifically sensitive incidents. My records, at least when it comes to the chart, I removed records from clients who are no longer with us. January should be at 11, actually. We called it Hackpocalypse 1. We called July Hackpocalypse 2, and I think it's a lot of compromises, but that's okay. So blue on its own shows incidents where there was very little actual access or activity on the account after it was compromised. This was generally because some form of alerting tool caught the compromise and I was able to remediate it before it escalated any further. All right, this chart's also really bad. Application usage, so OAuth applications I mentioned. At first, it was mainly a auto-sending application. This bar represents one. I cut off the table of how many things represent. I'm very sorry about that. So at first, it was the auto-sender, and then I saw my favorite application got me I think about 2,000 views on my blog of article about perfect data software, mailbox exfiltration. Admin account consents to perfect data software, every single inbox in your tenant exported to PST and gone. So turn that off as well, please. Turn off application consents, but that's in the control. July, I had both perfect data software twice, and then an application specifically registered in Azure, which allowed for, I believe, persistence or exfiltration. That was really great. I only learned about it because Microsoft disabled it because they figured out it was malicious. Rules created in about 2/3 of incidents, and then spam emails were sent in about a quarter. This pie chart tends to fluctuate month by month, I find, based on trends. I don't have enough data to fully map trends, but someday I think I will. I hate this chart. This is incident and the compromised account MFA status. So ignore February because, like I mentioned, offboarded clients, no more records. August was the first month where I had more accounts with MFA compromised than without. And when it isn't a dig on accurate sales, this is a dig on everybody's sales and technicians. Everybody was constantly told MFA protects your accounts from compromise. MFA will secure your account. Yeah, sorry. Turns out that's not true, really. but people don't like this graph. I don't like this graph. My leadership doesn't like this graph. I'm working on it though. I have solutions to this internally, at least. The rest of you are kind of on your own. I mean, I have like 5 articles drafted, and one of them is about preventing MFA bypass, but it's a long ways coming. I have 20 hours of video to edit as well about various things such as that. And just because I thought it was neat, this is incident status and its source. At first, it was explicit report, so either user account, user notices something strange, tells us, or user account sends us spam. That was the most common one. And then eventually, it became a specific alerting tool called Blumira. I really love Blumira. I'm constantly shilling for Blumira. It is a free cloud alerting SIM solution tailored for SMBs and MSPs. 360 monitoring completely free. They let us abuse their free tier a lot. And so if anybody ever looks at Blumira and happens to get any sort of, give them any money, please say Accurate sent you, so they will allow us to continue abusing their free tier because they almost took it away. But we'll pay for it if they need, because it's been very, very valuable. So I did have a demo. I don't have time for the demo. Demo details MFA token theft and how in 5 minutes I can go from initial access to an account to persistence, indicator removal, and mailbox exfiltration via malicious app consent in, like I mentioned, 5 minutes, which is faster than most. Microsoft Logs will even take to register any of those events. So, yeah, sorry about that bad news. That is definitely, if it's not available on my YouTube already, it will be by the time I loved it. So, when it comes to technical controls, one of the best ones I find is phishing resistant MFA. This is MFA that is resistant to token theft or social engineering. FIDO2 hardware tokens are a great example of this. Like I mentioned, preventing MFA bypass, FIDO2 and Windows Flow for Business. If you're on Azure, I don't know about Google. I don't do Google. Somebody who does Google passkeys, I believe. Yes, probably. So another control I like is stricter authentication controls and requirements, conditional access within 365, context-aware access in Google, things such as geofencing to the company network or requiring devices to be company owned or compliant or secure to access sensitive resources. So both Azure and Google allow you to place restrictions on third-party app access to data. Like I mentioned, even Azure allows you to control. I can't really stress to any 365 admin fair enough to write that down and do it, please. Because trust me, you don't want a mass privacy breach because an admin account stole 50 PSTs. It hasn't happened yet, but please. Another control that I like and I think is actually really simple but important is a good email filtering solution. Pardon the one that comes with your email program, do a third-party one. As long as you are preventing phishing emails from reaching the inbox, you're already going to be mitigating your risk. And finally, for technical, the one I think is the most important right below phishing-resistant MFA is alerting. There are native alerting solutions available for most cloud email providers, may or may not be locked behind a minor or massive paywall, Microsoft. But there's also third-party solutions for SMB, enterprise, MSP, internal IT. And you can even build something out yourself if you really want to. But alerting, very, very important, as we saw on a couple slides ago. Animations. So this was originally administrative controls. Then when I was reviewing for Security Plus, I was like, oh, operational controls totally exist. And the first one is actually technically an operational control, security awareness training. I think it's one of the most important operational controls, as long as you do it correctly, as long as your employees don't think that it's this boring thing that they're forced to do and they just play the video on one monitor and do their work and then just do all the questions until they get 100% and they're like, I'm done for this year. Especially difficult with technical employees to keep them engaged. Trust me, I manage our internal security awareness training. I have experienced this. You have to make it really interesting for them, and you also need to regularly run phishing simulations to actually test that whatever offering or product you have is effective. And you need to try to tailor those simulations to the threats actually facing your organization, such as when I'm sure we were all getting a flood of QR code phishing emails a while ago, having some education and then some phishing simulations involving QR codes is really useful for telling which of your employees actually read emails and don't just blindly go about their day-to-day life. Then there's everybody's favorite, which is policies and procedures. Ideally, you would have policies for things such as storage of sensitive data, email security, changes to financial information. This will help avoid cases where a compromised vendor account changes the account where you send payments to, or an employee emails you from personal Gmail and changes direct deposit information. And then finally, you need to ensure that the companies you partner with will actually take your financial security seriously. Will your bank call you to confirm large changes, such as adding a new authorized signer? Do they have to follow any compliance standards, and do they actually follow them? So all of these and more, unfortunately, quite a decent amount more, are just things to consider when thinking about how to protect your organization or your clients from a potentially company ruining incident. Okay, so I know some of you might be thinking this, probably not many, or more likely you know somebody who thinks this way, or this is just a straw man argument I made up for this. But why should I? Somebody's email gets hacked and they view a couple invoices or they send some spam, maybe we lose some money. Well, large company or small company, nonprofit or law firm, the fallout from a business email compromise could still be highly damaging to your organization. I want to highlight this. If the second wire transfer had gone through, company X would not have been able to make payroll, which was in 2 days. So if your company, one of your accounts is hacked and a customer pays to the wrong bank account, do you think they're going to be very happy about that, especially if it was your fault in the first place? Do you think I feel safe doing business with a company that had a hacked email send me a phishing email? No, I'm sending that shit to the privacy commissioner, right? So speaking of the privacy commissioner, do you think an email compromise is a privacy breach? Well, we don't store any personal information in our emails, so we should be fine. Well, I swear, I'm definitely not a lawyer, if you can't tell, but according to the Alberta Privacy Commissioner, you might not be. Offside, if there is anybody from the OIPC here, please talk to me afterwards. I have something really interesting and cool. And if all of you are like, oh, I want to know, I have to make sure I haven't done anything illegal, I swear. So maybe next year's B-side is I'll talk about that. But I need somebody. I can't get past reception, honestly, with the OIPC. They're not being helpful. So a decision from the OIPC in January 2023 details an incident where a employee from the Calgary Urban Project Society, CUPS, was phished and their account sent out just 150 spam emails. So the OIPC determined, and I quote, there is a real risk of significant harm to the individuals affected by this incident. So CUPS had to do breach notifications. And in this case, they weren't required to do credit monitoring, but sometimes they are. Equifax, others. I'm not sure the last one who had to do credit monitoring in Canada. Surprisingly, not the Dental Association hack. I would have thought that it would have required it wasn't a dental association. Some of you probably also got the same letter I did and know what I'm talking about. So here is a picture of their summary decision, but I want to quote what they said on harm in their more in-depth analysis. So to quote, in my view, a reasonable person would consider that the contact and identity information at issue could be used to cause the harms of identity theft and fraud. Email addresses could be used for the purposes of phishing, increasing vulnerability to identity theft and fraud. These are all significant harms. And trust me, you peep that link, this is far from the only decision saying essentially the same thing in the last even 6 months. I think there's 2 this month even. So current legislation around privacy breaches and specifically breach reporting are, in my uneducated opinion, maybe a little toothless. But a new bill, which is currently making its way through whatever bills do in Canada. I didn't pass social studies, sorry. It failed the first time. It's making its way through the second time. It's the Canadian Privacy Protection Act. It proposes stronger penalties for both the negligence causing the breach as well as failing to report the breach. So yes, your customer sends out 100 spam emails and doesn't report it as a privacy breach. I believe right now in the bill they could go to prison, but they'll probably take that out. So hopefully this specific section is enough for some of you to perhaps convince your bosses or clients to move to phishing resistant MFA. Okay, summary time. What did we learn? Well, having an email compromise can turn out really badly. Shocking, I know. They are generally predictable. Their goal is to just keep compromising accounts, hopping from account to account until one with the correct access or level of administrative ability is found for whatever their plan is. That really helps with, and there's actually only generally, looking back at malicious activity, a handful of actions that are actually done on an account in a traditional email compromise. This hasn't covered administrative account compromises. That's maybe another 2 B-sides from now. But the fact that there's only a handful of actions that actually take place on account it's really helpful for the next point, which is that they are preventable-ish, or at least you can mitigate a lot of the risk around them. Alerting on known malicious actions or suspicious activity is still one of the best controls I recommend. And finally, I think this, I'm not sure if this thinking is more prevalent just in SMB or also enterprise or all over the world, but they are more serious than a lot of people seem to think. I'm going to guess there is still a decent chunk of people in this room who had no idea that the OIPC considers an account just sending out 150 spam emails to be a privacy breach. So, beautiful. I'm a big supporter of slide transitions. I love them. And I think that PowerPoints need to be cool and fun. So before we get questions, website, blog, fully safe to scan, I promise. I'm right here and I'm afraid of confrontation if they're not, so I promise. That is everything. Thank you. Whoa. That's one more. All right. I don't know if we have time for questions, but we're gonna say technically I think we do. So any questions? That's tonight. Oh, and if just in case, because I spent $35 on Vistaprint, I have very, very serious and professional business cards. I'm gonna dump them on this desk. I totally didn't get these. How do I make the desk go, please? Just so I could put them in draws for prizes at vendor booths. And because people kept asking me what my web blog URL was. Questions? Fine by me. Okay, thank you.